And Earl Blumenauer tweeting, "This is not a debt ceiling bill. It is a party platform proposal. It has no place in the obligation to pay our debts." More at twitter.com/cspan. Well, the U.S. House is about to gavel in for legislative work this afternoon. Several bills on the agenda, including one authorizing a land swap in Arizona between the federal government and Resolution Copper Company. Live coverage now of the U.S. House here on C-SPAN.
The House will be in order. Prayer will be led by our chaplain, Father Conroy.
Let us pray. Dear Lord, we give you thanks for giving us another day. We come to you as a nation in the midst of great uncertainty and worry. As people look for causes and solutions, the temptation is great to seek ideological position. We ask that you might send your spirit of peace and reconciliation, that instead of ascendancy over opponents, the members of this people's House and all elected to represent our nation might work together humbly, recognizing the best in each other's hopes to bring stability and direction toward a strong future. May all that is done this day be for your greater honor and glory. Amen.
The Chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House his approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina rise?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Clause 1, Rule 1, I demand a vote on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal.
Questions on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal? Those in favor indicate by saying aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it. The journal stands approved. The gentleman from South Carolina.
Mr. Speaker, I object to the vote on the grounds that a quorum is not present and make the point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question are postponed. The Pledge of Allegiance today will be led by the gentlelady from Ohio, Ms. Fudge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Chair will entertain up to 15 requests for 1-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise? Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the House-passed continuing resolution, and I call for its passage in the United States Senate. The House-passed resolution ensures that our government remains open and operational. It ensures that our military personnel will continue to receive protection in the field and pay at home, and it guarantees continued care for our veterans. It protects individuals, families, and small businesses from the harmful effects of Obamacare, and it holds the line on spending, the most critical fiscal issue currently facing Washington and the American people. The United States Senate should join the House and pass this fiscally responsible measure and avert a governmental shutdown. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Ohio rise? Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to celebrate the beginning of a new era in American health care. In less than a week, Americans across the country will be able to enroll in health insurance marketplaces, more commonly known as health exchanges. Americans will no longer be subjected to annual limits on their coverage or refused insurance because of a pre-existing condition. We as a nation will be that much closer to ensuring that every American has access to high-quality and affordable health care. The United States is undoubtedly home to the world's best doctors, hospitals, and health care providers. And starting January 1st, more than 6 million children, seniors, women, and men will be able to access world-class care at less than $100 a month. I certainly believe that's something worth celebrating. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
That's the House 1 minute.
Well, gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker,
On Saturday, September 21st, New Jersey and our nation lost a true hero. Staff Sergeant Timothy Raymond McGill was killed in Afghanistan in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. After graduating from Ramsey High School in 2001, Staff Sergeant McGill joined the Marines and later deployed to Iraq. In 2008, he joined the Rhode Island National Guard, basically to chase his dream of joining Special Forces. And then in 2011, Staff Sergeant McGill was made a weapons sergeant and was most recently assigned to A Company, 2nd Battalion, 19th Special Group Force, Army National Guard in Middletown, Rhode Island. And in between these deployments, Staff Sergeant McGill volunteered in Ramsey Fire Department back home in the state of New Jersey. You see, Staff Sergeant McGill was always committed to his community and to this country. He was truly one of the best and the brightest of the 5th Congressional District, and my prayers are with the family of Staff Sergeant McGill. With that, I yield back.
What purpose does the gentlelady from Texas rise? Without objection, so ordered. The gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A government shutdown would damage the economic recovery, slow our growth over the long term, and severely undermine our ability to extend our recovery and put people back to work. As we debate the continuing resolution, I must emphasize investments in education, which are the wisest investments we can make for the long-term fiscal survival of our country. We are jeopardizing our future as a nation by threatening educational services, as well as eliminating and reducing financial aid for millions of students attending pre-K, elementary, secondary, and post-secondary schools. This week, I introduced a resolution to honor our nation's historically black colleges and universities. I am concerned that these institutions will be disproportionately affected by any cuts. Each day, historically black colleges and universities help us bridge the achievement gap. The fact is that we cannot move forward as a country until all of our children have the opportunity to succeed academically. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired. For what purpose the gentleman from Missouri rise?
Permission to address the House for 1 minute and advise to extend my remarks.
Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today I come to the House floor to speak on an issue that is on the minds of many of my constituents and Americans across the country, and that is Obamacare. Enrollment is set to begin in only 5 short days, yet there is far too much confusion about how hardworking Americans will purchase their health insurance through Obamacare exchanges. One constituent from Missouri's 3rd District recently contacted my office in a panic about how Obamacare is going to impact her personally as well as her small business. She's reached out to her accountant, insurance broker, and health care provider, and guess what, Mr. Speaker? Nobody has a clue how this is all going to play out. Unlike the federal government, she is forced to balance both her family's and her business's budget. But when she has no idea how much health insurance is going to cost, she has a very large hole in both her budgets that makes it nearly impossible to plan for other things, whether it's new prescription glasses for her child to see the board at school, or hiring a new employee for a small business she hopes to expand. Mr. Speaker, this is not an isolated incident. I received hundreds of emails and phone calls expressing real fears from folks about Obamacare. From what I'm hearing and seeing firsthand, the Affordable Care Act is neither affordable nor caring. Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
This time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Illinois rise? Without objection, so ordered. The gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you. I rise today to urge my colleagues to put America first and pass a bipartisan spending plan to prevent a government shutdown. As the daughter of a small business owner, I learned at an early age that it's impossible to succeed without smart planning and reliable funding. Let's keep this lesson in mind. Millions of Americans will be left hanging if the government shuts down. Benefits for veterans could be delayed, approval of small business loans would be suspended, and the National Institutes of Health and Center for Disease Control, which monitor disease, may be forced to scale back their services, leaving us vulnerable to a health crisis. One of the last government shutdowns in this country cost taxpayers $800 million, including $400 million lost revenue collected by the IRS. We can't afford to go through that again. It is time to put an end to the partisan games. American citizens aren't chips to be gambled with. Our servicemen and women, mom-and-pop business owners, and families who show up for America every day deserve a government that shows up for them. Let's stop grandstanding and start standing up for the American people by passing a CR.
Gentleman's lady time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina rise?
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
No objections, so ordered. Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, Obamacare is unaffordable, unsustainable, and unreliable. An overwhelming majority of the American people agree that this disastrous $1.2 trillion law must be replaced with a system that protects the doctor-patient relationship, as has been repeatedly introduced by Congressman Tom Price of Georgia. The South Carolina Department of Insurance has estimated that health insurance rates in the federal exchanges will increase up to 70% for South Carolinians. A majority of other states will have premium increases that will skyrocket, destroying jobs. House Republicans have the best interest of Americans at heart. We know that hardworking families should not be forced to pay higher health care costs in addition to the financial burdens of everyday life. The Senate should act and adopt bipartisan legislation, as the House did last week. We join with the American people to keep the government's doors open, defund Obamacare, and control government spending. In conclusion, God bless our troops, and we'll never forget September 11th and the global war on terrorism.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan rise?
Address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, a critical deadline looms again. And here we are, circling the drain, days away from another Republican-manufactured government shutdown due to the irresponsible lack of governing. Instead of forging or even attempting to forge a bipartisan compromise, we have another manufactured crisis putting America on another roller coaster ride. Unfortunately, we have been here before, with the other party playing politics and pandering to their Tea Party base rather than doing what we were sent here to do, and that is to govern. It's enough. The American public is fed up with this. It's time to drop the foolishness and stop pursuing through threatening means that threaten the economy what you can't achieve at the ballot box or through legislation. The implications of this shutdown are real. It will hurt the American economy. It threatens direct benefits that our veterans and people with disabilities receive. There's just too much at stake. Republicans should drop this charade and do the job that we were elected to do, and that is govern, pass a budget, and protect the rights of the American people. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does another gentleman from Michigan rise?
Mr. Speaker, unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, we sincerely need true leadership at this time. Great problems, great challenges, great divisions. And yet our President's first call last Friday to House leadership clearly indicated in his own words that he would not negotiate. How can this be leadership? 61% of citizens polled recently want spending cuts tied to the debt ceiling bill. Bill, in my town hall meeting yesterday morning, said my wife is very sick. I pay $900 a month for my health insurance. I need that. But I want you to go to Washington and end the spending. Move our country forward. Shut down Obamacare. Mr. President, you won't negotiate? You negotiated with Mr. Putin and Mr. Assad. You negotiated with the UN on an arms treaty threatening our Second Amendment liberty. Why would you not negotiate with the People's House and the people who sent us to restore fiscal sanity, economic opportunity, and liberty? I yield back.
Chair reminds the House to target your comments to the chair. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Nevada rise? Without objection, so ordered. You're recognized.
This week, a leading Nevada Republican said that the 2014 elections will be a great year for Republicans because a lot of minorities and a lot of younger people will not turn out. Well, while the GOP plan for 2014 is focused on voter suppression, I'm here to deliver a different message. Minorities and women are going to be turning out in droves next year because they see what the Republican leadership is doing in Washington. They see the dysfunction the Republicans have created and are apparently so proud of. They see the Republican agenda that's driven by an extremist ideology rather than what's best for Americans. In fact, voters of all types are seeing and will see over the next few days just how out of step the House Republicans truly are. They grapple not with the needs of Americans, but with the two wings of their own caucus, the far right and the further right. We need a new agenda.
Gentlelady's time has expired. For what purpose, the gentleman from North Carolina rise? Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to share a letter from Dr. Billy Graham to Iranian President Rouhani calling for the release of an American citizen currently in prison in Iran due to his faith. I quote from Dr. Graham, "The announcement on Monday that your country has freed 80 political prisoners is very encouraging. I fear, however, that the current publicity surrounding the continued imprisonment of Pastor Abedini, an American citizen, may further harm the already fragile relationship that presently exists between our two nations. Today, thousands will attend prayer vigils in more than 70 cities around the country, calling on your country to release this husband, father, and servant of God. I join them by respectfully asking you to release Pastor Saeed Abedini from prison. Such an action would, I believe, have a positive impact in our nation and might well be perceived by our leadership as a significant step in reducing tensions. Respectfully yours, Billy Graham." I'm placing Dr. Graham's full letter in the congressional record. Today, I also wrote President Obama with other House members asking that he call on Iran to free this American citizen and humanitarian. I urge you to join me in this effort. Thank
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Minnesota rise?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, so ordered. Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, it's time to put an end to the political stagecraft and the gridlock that's come to characterize this chamber. It's time for a little common sense, some collaboration, and some compromise. 238 years ago, the founders of our great nation risked their lives to establish this government. Imagine their reaction today as this body contemplates actions that would shut it down. I'm a business guy, 32 years. I've tried a lot of ways to fix problems over the years, but shutting down the store has never been one of them. Mr. Speaker, this is not a game. This is real life to the kids on Head Start, to the National Guard and the men and women in our armed forces being furloughed, to the seniors, to the students, the families struggling to get by, and to the millions of hard-working public servants who go to work every day on our behalf. Mr. Speaker, we need to put an end to this folly, pass a clean continuing resolution funding our government, and then get to work, balancing our budget, ending sequester, rebuilding America, rebuilding the middle class, and putting America back to work.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania rise? Without orders, you're so ordered, and you are recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over 3 months ago, the House passed a defense appropriations bill with overwhelming bipartisan support. As we approach the end of the fiscal year, I want to remind Senate Democrats and the President that our fighting men and women are counting on us. The leadership in the Senate failed to even bring a defense funding measure to the floor this year. Now, should they fail to work with the House to fund the government, pay for our soldiers, sailors, and airmen could be delayed. Cutbacks could reduce their readiness and delay the procurement of tools they need to defend our nation and themselves. At a time when fighting continues in Afghanistan and we face serious threats from terrorists, at a time when the President is threatening force in Syria, we cannot let our guard down. And we should not use our military and wounded warriors as pawns in political partisanship. The Senate needs to act without delay to pass funding and keep the government from shutting down. The safety of brave Americans around the world is at risk if we fail. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Minnesota rise? Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The one thing I hear from my constituents when I talk to them out in southern Minnesota is it's so much to ask you folks just to do your job. As the drama swirls and the brinkmanship goes and it's deja vu all over again, certain things shouldn't be that difficult. As we're doing this, my farmers and ranchers and millions of them across the country are going about their work every day, getting up before dawn, doing their work, feeding us, clothing us, and powering this country. They've asked us to pass a farm bill. 4 months ago, the Senate did it. 4 months ago, the House Ag Committee did it. That wasn't good enough. We came to this floor, we created drama, we tried to make being hungry a sin, and now you've got a monstrosity. Well, you know what? The Constitution makes it very clear. Bring the two together, conference the bill, and pass something that's good for America. I get it. You don't like the Senate bill. I get it. Senate doesn't like this bill. But you know what? Let's get together and get something we can both equally dislike, but at least it serves the people and moves something forward. The time is now. The Farm Bill is waiting. People are hungry and producers are growing food. Pass the Farm Bill.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee rise? Without objection, so ordered. Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, the Republicans in the House compromised and voted to fund everything in the entire federal government but Obamacare. Yet the President refuses to compromise on anything, even just that one bill. If you think most of the national media is not biased, just consider the fact that they are not calling on the President to compromise at all. The national media apparently believes that House Republicans should be the only ones required to compromise. Then look, too, at the different treatment given Texas State Senator Wendy Davis's filibuster and the filibuster-like speech by Senator Ted Cruz. The elite national media made Senator Davis an overnight sensation and treated her as courageous and even heroic. But Senator Cruz has been blasted in every way by the liberals who control most of the media, a double standard that is both very unfair and very harmful to the nation. If the federal government shuts down, it will be in large part because the national media, for some reason, feels the President has no obligation to compromise or moderate his views in any way. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from California rise?
Mr. Speaker, I rise to ask unanimous House for 1 minute.
Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
5 more days, Mr. Speaker. In just 5 days, this body threatens to shut down the government. The public and the American citizens are fed up with these shenanigans. They want us to do our job. If the government shuts down, we're going to send our military to work, but we're not going to pay them. If the government shuts down, veterans who have been waiting months for benefits are going to wait longer. Let's do our job. This is totally unacceptable. The people expect us to come together and put together a real budget. We passed no budget, no pay, but yet we don't have a budget. The House has passed one budget, the Senate's passed another. Let's come together in a conference, agree on a single number, and move forward and set our priorities. Enough kicking the can down the road. Let's keep the government open. Let's pass a budget. Let's start rebuilding the middle class for America, and one that works, and let's get back on the right track. We can do this. We've done it before. I yield back, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York rise?
Mr. Speaker, I request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, so ordered. Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I come to the House floor to speak in support of the Government Shutdown Fairness Act, which I introduced last Friday. This legislation would stop members of Congress from receiving a salary in the event of a government shutdown. As members of Congress, it is our job to keep the government running. And it is wrong that we would continue to get paid while programs for veterans, seniors, and many others are adversely impacted, and those in the military are not paid. This legislation is consistent with the 27th Amendment and would hold member salaries in escrow until the end of this Congress. Salary and job performance are often tied together, and it should be no different in the government. The American people deserve more from their Congress. We must be willing to put ourselves at the back of the line and put our constituents first during a government shutdown. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlelady from New York rise?
To address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my request.
Without objection, so ordered. The gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, and I quote, "Compromise is a way of life in public policy.
My way or no way is the mindset of a 5-year-old, not the leading legislative body of the Western world, end quote. This is a direct quote, Mr. Speaker, and I know it's accurate because it's from me over a decade ago. I was in Congress for the shutdowns of the federal government in 1995. They were as disastrous as they were unnecessary, a national disgrace, and today's funding debate is equally shameful. Holding government funding hostage and potentially following up with an act of blackmail over the debt limit is irresponsible and indifferent to the needs of millions across our country, particularly the military. This debate is another manufactured crisis, a willful, needless, self-inflicted wound that will have terrible effects on our economy, our fiscal outlook, and the American pocketbooks. The Congress of the United States should never, ever bow down before the rigid dictates of a handful of ideological extremists. We should do what is right for the people of our country and pass a clean budget now. Thank you.
Gentlelady's time has expired. For what purpose the gentleman from Indiana rise?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to congratulate the Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology on their #1 ranking as the top undergraduate engineering school in the nation. This is the 15th consecutive year for this honor by the U.S. News & World Report in a category of engineering schools whose highest degree is a bachelor's or master's degree. Founded in 1874 and located in Terre Haute, Indiana, Rose-Hulman successfully delivers the world's best undergraduate science, engineering, and mathematics education in an environment of individual attention and support. I commend Rose-Hulman for their excellent leadership and dedication and thank them for the important role they play as a world leader in the education of the STEM workforce of the future. I yield back.
For what purpose the gentleman from Nevada rise?
I ask for 1 minute to address the body.
Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to discuss a portion of our community in Nevada's 4th Congressional District that are being negatively affected under the sequestration and would be under a government shutdown. I am proud to speak on behalf of the Nellis Air Force Base in my district. Nellis Air Force Base employs over 3,000 civilian employees. They work as engineers, physicians, nurses, and administrators. I recently spoke with the commander about the negative effects that sequestration has already had on Nellis Air Force Base. For the past 3 years, the salaries of these civilian employees has been frozen. Positions are being eliminated, leaving remaining employees to pick up the slack. The civilian employees of Nellis Air Force Base are undergoing increasingly heavy responsibilities at work without any increase in pay. And for Nellis Air Force Base, sequestration has already meant a decrease of over 40,000 flights, which affects their readiness at a time of combat. It's time for this Congress to reach a deal on the budget. A clean continuing resolution does not jeopardize personnel, a deal that I hope we will work together to accomplish on behalf of Nellis Air Force Base and all of our civilians.
Has expired. For what purpose the gentleman from Idaho?
I rise to ask for unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, so ordered. You're recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to honor the heroic efforts of Colonel Bernard Francis Fisher of the United States Air Force and Lieutenant Thomas Roland Norris of the United States Navy, both of whom are Medal of Honor recipients from Idaho. Colonel Fisher was with the 1st Air Commando Squadron and was awarded the Medal of Honor for his gallantry on March 10, 1966, in the Republic of Vietnam. A Special Forces camp was under attack and hostile troops had positioned themselves between the airstrip and the camp. Colonel Fisher observed a fellow airman crash on the airstrip. In the belief that the pilot was injured, Colonel Fisher decided to attempt a rescue. Directing his own cover, he landed and taxied the full length of the runway to rescue the pilot. In the face of fire, he applied power and took off at the overrun airstrip.
Lieutenant Norris was a SEAL advisor and was awarded the Medal of Honor for supreme bravery in action from April 10th to April 13th, 1972 in Vietnam. During the 3-day period, Lieutenant Norris and a 5-man team established a forward operating base deep within heavily controlled enemy territory to conduct the rescue of several downed pilots. It is for their outstanding display of leadership and courage that I am proud to honor and remember the actions of Colonel Bernard Francis Fisher and Lieutenant Thomas Roland Norris. I yield back my
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose the gentlelady from Ohio rise?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to include extraneous material in the record.
Without objection, so ordered. The gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor a remarkable American, Mr. Jim Finley, who has proudly served our nation as an Air Force veteran in our Toledo community throughout his life as a successful entrepreneur, extraordinary philanthropist, and a true friend to so many. Jim Finley is the epitome of a gentleman. His influence and compassion have impacted the lives of thousands. He served as a coach to our youth, a mentor to our young adults. He's always there for those who seek a champion for their cause. His support of local initiatives is deep and legendary, and he was the fundraising chair for so many activities, a 70-year member of Glenwood Lutheran Church, a founding board member of the House of Emmanuel. Jim attended Scott High School and the University of Toledo, where he began his lifelong love affair with the UT Rockets, as well as the 1947 homecoming queen, Celia Kuntz Finley. He and Celia were married for more than 50 years until her passing in 2004. Jim is a dedicated family man to his children, Jim Jr., Sarah, John, a beloved grandfather to Allie and Jonathan, and wonderful companion to P.J. Schaefer. Jim founded Impact Products, and upon his retirement, in typical Jim Finley fashion, he gave the company to his employees. The company's name, Impact, is a testament to the impact that one person can selflessly make on the lives of so many. We, the family of Toledo and Northwest Ohio, are blessed and honored to know and pay tribute to our dear friend Jim Finley, who in good times and times of great struggle teach us by way of his courageous and generous example. May blessings flow to Jim now and to his loved ones. We love you, Jim, now and always, and we thank you. Mr. Speaker, I yield back my remaining time.
Time has expired. For what purpose the gentleman from Illinois rise? Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are 5 days away from what the Chicago Tribune today called a massively ambitious redesign of national health care, echoing what we've been saying here on the House floor since it was passed. But the details of Illinois' health exchange are still thin. Co-pays, deductibles, premiums, still a mystery, the paper says. Will your doctor and your hospital be included in the insurance networks? Still a mystery. This past week, I tried to get answers from my concerned constituents. I tried to meet with one of Illinois' so-called navigators, but they weren't ready to show me how to sign up for health care. Their navigators were still getting trained up with less than a week left. The tripled premiums we're seeing in other states aren't encouraging. We know that 6 million, mostly middle-class families, may face a tax for not buying qualifying health plans. Middle-class families may have to pay hundreds more in taxes each year. I urge Americans to explore how Obamacare will affect them. Call your exchange and ask if you can keep your doctor. Ask them what personal information the navigators will collect. Be ready. Buyer beware.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose the gentleman from California rise? Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, it's kind of interesting to me hear all the chatter about government shutdown here. It seems to be coming from the other side. I think they maybe protest us too loudly because Republicans have acted to give the Senate and the President the tools, the means, to avoid a government shutdown. We've acted on 2 occasions to pass the language of the Full Faith and Credit Act to ensure the government continues paying its bills in the event of an impasse in budget negotiations. However, the Senate has failed to act on a common-sense proposal which would preserve our nation's credit rating, continue paying the military, protect Social Security, and other essential services. Where's the Senate's actions on this measure? What's the President doing to help? He's instead more willing to meet with foreign leaders and unwilling to talk to us in the House here. Mr. Speaker, is this what the American people asked for, that we have an impasse amongst the 3 legs of the legislative process in this country, that we can't even talk to each other, we'd rather talk to foreign leaders first? on the important key issues like what we have coming up, continuing resolution, sequester, debt limit, and the impending Obamacare takeover of our health system. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purposes, gentlelady from North Carolina rise?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, Mr. Speaker.
Without objection, so ordered. Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Obamacare is dead weight on a stagnant job market. Millions of Americans are out of work. Millions more are underemployed, crunching numbers around the kitchen tables trying to make ends meet. Yet Obamacare is undermining growth and making it harder for businesses, large and small, to hire more full-time workers or even maintain part-time worker schedules. It is cited as a leading cause for why nearly 3 out of 4 people hired this year were offered only part-time jobs. The stagnant economic report we received earlier this month is a continued reminder that Obamacare is not the job creator or economic driver the President promised. It's a burden on employers, and it is translating into prolonged underemployment for working American families. Republicans and Democrats need to work together to repeal, defund, delay, and replace Obamacare for these families. Meaningful reform is worth the effort. I yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired. For what purpose, the gentlelady from Texas rise? Without objection, so ordered. The gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Chair, I think the real message should be that the President should not negotiate against the civil rights of Americans. Sometimes it's important for those of us who've had life experiences to reflect on them. And I remember as a younger girl riding in a segregated rail car, isolated from others because of the color of my skin. Civil rights has expanded, but there were many who stood against it. The 1957 bill, the 1964 and 1965. Americans will find out that health care is a civil right, and that this is one of the most historic and life-changing bills ever passed, the Affordable Care Act. And rather than stand in the way to defund Obamacare, I want to stand with the young cancer victim who will now be able to get insurance. I want to stand with the young child that had leukemia that was denied insurance and died. I want to stand with small businesses who will now be able to provide health insurance for their workers. I want to stand with understanding that, in fact, this bill is going to work. That's the fear on the other side. They're willing to defund the government because they don't want America to know that one of their civil rights, good health care, is coming and going to work. I ask everybody to get on to healthcare.gov because your civil rights are coming October 1st. I yield back.
Time has expired. For what purpose, the gentleman from Texas rise?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, so ordered. Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, the President says he will negotiate with Syria over chemical weapons. He is negotiating with the Russians about negotiating with the Syrians over nuclear weapons. He's offered to talk and compromise with Iran over nuclear weapons. But the President says, I will not negotiate with those in the House of Representatives. No compromise on the debt. I will not negotiate with America. Too bad the President is more interested with negotiation and compromise with Russia, Syria, Iran, and now the United Nations than he is working with members of the House of Representatives and the American people to keep the government from shutting down. It's been mentioned that the President, or it's been mentioned today, of this philosophy of my way or the highway. Well, that's the President's philosophy. It's my way, says the President, or it's the highway. He won't talk to us about it because he's out campaigning about how Obamacare is really good for the nation. He's driving the train wreck of stubbornness which will lead and has led to chaos in America. Come home, Mr. President. Let's sit down and talk about what we're going to do over the debt limit and the continuing resolution. And that's just the way it is. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Seeing no further speaker requests for 1 minute, then pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, proceedings will resume on questions previously postponed. Votes will be taken in the following order: H.R. 3095 by the yeas and nays, H.R. 2600 by the yeas and nays, and approval of the Journal de Novo. The first electronic vote will be conducted as a 15-minute vote. Remaining electronic votes will be conducted as 5-minute votes. The unfinished business is the vote on the motion of the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Petri, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 3095, on which the yeas and nays were ordered. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar number 165, H.R. 3095, a bill to ensure that any new or revised requirement providing for the screening, testing, or treatment of individuals operating commercial motor vehicles for sleep disorders is adopted pursuant to a rulemaking proceeding and for other purposes.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill? Members will record their vote by electronic device, and this is a 15-minute vote.
The House gavel's back into session for legislative work, finishing up some votes on bills debated earlier this week. This is a bill that would require the Department of Transportation to complete a formal rulemaking process if they decide to establish requirements for commercial truckers to address certain sleep disorders. This is a 15-minute vote, expected to be followed by 2 5-minute votes, and they'll take up a bill today that would authorize a land swap between the federal government and the Resolution Copper Company involving tracts of land in Arizona. General debate on that ahead, and also amendment votes as well. As the House waits for resolution of the continuing resolution discussion in the Senate, the House last week passed their CR funding the federal government past the September 30th end of fiscal year, and also stripping away funding for the health care law. The Senate taking up the legislation, but they will strip out the defunding language in the Senate. They will also shorten the length of the CR to 2 months instead of 3 months. Briefings on Capitol Hill today. We hope to show you both of them during this 15-minute votes. We heard from Republicans on the House side earlier after their conference, and Democrats in the Senate just wrapped up their briefing with reporters. We'll show you that now.
We're going to move forward just as quickly as we can. Under the present process, we'll finish Saturday. We can, as I said on the floor this morning, we can collapse that time to finish today. Having said that, if anyone here thinks Republicans in the House have a workable plan for a shutdown on Monday, tell me about it. I get all kinds of reports from them. They're going to do this, they're going to do that. So we'll have to see what they decide to do, because right now they don't know. From everything I see, they're in this ditch, and they want to get out of it, but they keep digging deeper and deeper and deeper, and this ditch they can hardly see out of the top of it now. I don't know what they're going to do. I don't think they know what, as I said, they don't know what they're going to do. The Tea Party's put them in this hole, and the Tea Party keeps them digging deeper and deeper. We want to finish this legislation as quickly as possible. Every hour that ticks by puts our country closer to a shutdown. There's still time for cooler heads to prevail, but not a lot of time. I was so encouraged yesterday to see people come down who are Republicans and talk about the need to finish this legislation. There were a lot of good presentations. We've heard about what they were going to do with suicide, dumbest idea they ever heard, Box Canyon. But John McCain did the best yesterday. Obamacare is the law. It is the law. Has been for 4 years, declared constitutional. They've got to move on to something else. That was won fair and square. As John McCain said, he wished we hadn't won, but we did. Move on to something else. So I hope there's a few reasonable Republicans in the House that start talking like a few reasonable Republicans over here. We haven't seen it yet. This is not a game for the middle class. not an effort to satisfy the Koch brothers. This is dealing with their lives. I do my Welcome to Washington every Thursday. One from Boulder City, Nevada came to me and said, I appreciate your meeting with five of my students. I appreciate that very much. But she said, you know, I work for the United States Park Service. And we are so afraid. We know if there's a CR, the parks are going to shut down. That will mean I won't have a job. It's through the federal government this way. That's what's happening in the stock market. The longest succession of down days since 2012, well more than a year. Because not only does someone that works at the Park Service not know what's going to happen, the financial markets don't know what's going to happen. This is really a sad, sad commentary on what's happening in the House. Again, I hope to pass this bill as quickly as possible. I hope the Republicans over here will stick with this. Senator Mikulski, Chairman of the Appropriations Committee.
You are. And then after me. We Democrats want to be sure that the government stays open and does the job that it's supposed to do. We Democrats want to keep the government open and is working as hard for the American people as the people who work hard to enable it to pay the bills. We are just days away from a government shutdown. The clock is ticking. You can see for itself. We have put forth a plan that does two things. Keep the government funding until November 15th to enable us to work out a longer-range solution. And number two, we've got rid of the two riders that would be so provocative that they would be veto bait by the President of the United States. Let's be clear. Any attachment that either defunds or delays the Affordable Care Act will be vetoed by the President. You can huff, you can puff for 21 hours, but you cannot blow the Affordable Care Act away. So we have in our amendment, we eliminate the rider to defund Obamacare. We also eliminate the rider to reconstruct the way America would pay our bills, because we don't believe you should pay China first. We believe you should pay Social Security and veterans benefits first. And then we keep government open so that we can arrive at a process where we can move all of the funding for next year forward in a way that meets the missions, shows that we can be a more frugal government, and avoid a shutdown and this draconian effect of sequester. Make no mistake, shutdown is not theater. Shutdown has real consequences. If we go to a shutdown, lots of things will happen. First of all, for Social Security, you will get your benefits, but Social Security offices will either be closed or open only part-time, so your earned benefits, you won't even be able to apply for them. Even though we protect the veterans, the fact is that it will further make the disability claims process even more backlog. We don't want to do that. Thousands of students will be unable to pay their tuition because their loans will be delayed. Every single day, there will be another aspect of what a consequence of a shutdown is. And it's not only shutdown that's bad. We have to get to how we're going to fund our government for fiscal year 14. We want to be sure that we do it in a way that meets mission, meets purpose, and do it in a way that's fiscally responsible. But we have something called sequester. Sequester is a mechanism to do swashbuckling across-the-board cuts, no matter if the program is good or whether the program is dated. We oppose that. We want to cancel sequester for at least 2 years. Let me just give you one example. I have the proud honor to represent the National Institutes of Health in my state. Working there every day are people who've won the Nobel Prize, people who should win the Nobel Prize because they're out there finding cures for the diseases that affect the American people. This year, when they announced that cancer rates were reduced by 15% because of the work that had been done, instead of pinning medals on them, they were told they were going to get pink slips and be furloughed. Sequester means 5% cuts in 27 institutes and centers, whether they're on the cusp of a breakthrough or not. Whether you're dealing with an epidemic, a pan-epidemic, or whether you're dealing with the epidemic of Alzheimer's and autism in our country. We should be funding this, but oh no, we're going to cut the NIH by $2 billion, make sure that new grants are not funded, and make sure that people stand in line for the help that they need when they want to be admitted to the NIH hospital. This has consequences to lives, the future of our economy, where we come up with new ideas for new products. And if you want to save the budget, I'll give you with one fact. In our whole Medicaid funding, 80% of the beneficiaries are children, but 80% of the money goes to paying for long-term care because of Alzheimer's and because of Parkinson's, Lou Gehrig's disease, and other neurological impediments. If you want to reduce the Medicaid budget, you fund NIH. So we find those cures that can help those people with those horrible diseases, help the family, and help our country. So let's get on with it, and let's stop huffing and puffing where the greatest deliberative body has become the greatest delayed body.
Thank you, Senator Reid and Senator Mikulski and Senators Murray and Schumer. There are only 5 days left in the fiscal year, and instead of working with Democrats to avoid a government shutdown, Republicans continue to march us right to the edge of another cliff. This week, the Senate's going to pass a clean, continuing resolution, funding the government at least until November 15th and giving us time to come together, pass a budget and the appropriations bills for the next year. This is the only sensible solution. Speaker Boehner, the House Republicans, the Tea Party members of the Senate, Senator Cruz, and others are playing high-stakes poker with other people's money. Let me tell you what I mean. Their threats are not going to affect them. Their threats are going to affect a lot of innocent people across America. You heard Senator Mikulski go through the litany of those who will be impacted by a government shutdown, not to mention the thousands of federal employees across America, uncertain today as to whether they're going to be needed at work on Tuesday morning and can show up. So the Republicans have decided that they're going to use them as pawns in this political debate. And if that isn't bad enough, they take the next step. The next step is to threaten the debt ceiling, the paying of bills by our federal government. If they stand by their position and don't give us a clean extension of the debt ceiling, the victims will include not just federal employees, but all employees across America. The economists that we've met with have made it extremely clear. The Business Roundtable has made it clear. This is a catastrophic strategy by the Republicans that will cost us jobs in America and cause businesses to throttle back instead of moving forward and hiring people, putting them back to work. So the Republicans are playing high-stakes poker with the lives of so many innocent people across America. It's time for this to come to an end. We're going to give them a clean CR. We're prepared to vote for a clean extension of the debt ceiling. Let's get on with the business that's important for this country, of creating jobs and working to help the middle class in America have a fighting chance. I want to make one last point related to the 21-hour, not a filibuster, but speech on the floor by the junior senator from Texas. During the course of that debate, he told us a lot. Some of it was very interesting and very personal about himself and his family, his father, the inspirations in his life. He went on at great length in doing so. He told us a lot of detail about his relationship with his family and a lot of personal things. I came to the floor and asked him a basic question. Senator Ted Cruz, where do you get your health insurance? Well, the only thing he would say is he didn't take the federal insurance plan, the federal health employees benefit plan that we all have. He's refused to tell the press where he gets his health insurance. This man who stood there for 21 hours lecturing us about America's health insurance coverage will not tell the public what his health insurance coverage is. Working press, it's time to ask, how is he getting his health insurance? What's the employer contribution for his health insurance? Isn't that important to ask? He raised the issue, didn't he? How many times on the floor did he tell you about the Vitter Amendment and the health insurance for members of Congress and their employees? How many times did he raise that issue? And not once has he come clean to explain his health insurance. If he's one of those lucky people who's wealthy enough to buy the biggest plan in the world, God bless him. But I can tell you an awful lot of people who are depending on the President's Affordable Care Act don't have that luxury today. Senator Cruz would deny them the opportunity to buy health insurance. Ask him where he gets his health insurance. I think it's an important question and one that he raised with his own debate.
Wow. Powerful.
Okay, thank you, everybody, and I want to thank my colleagues for their great words on this. Now, we're seeing a crusade this week from the far right of the Republican Party. Their goal, to hold the government and the American people hostage until we delay, defund, or derail Obamacare. What they're doing is nothing new. Over in the House, the hostage takers on the far right won out, and the Republican leadership caved and handed them the keys and let them run the show. As a result, the House pushed us to 4 days away. 4 days, 11 hours, 33 minutes, and 7 seconds until Republicans shut down the government. That is a disgrace. They know they're shutting down the government because they know that their CR will never pass this body and will never be signed by a president. Now, the continuing resolution that the House passed is before us here in the Senate, and we're watching an attempt to force a rerun of that same show. A few strident voices on the far right of the Republican Party have pledged they'll do everything in their power to block the Senate from passing a clean CR. But in this episode, there's a plot twist. For the first time since the hard right movement on Obamacare gained steam, Republican leadership in the Senate, backed by the majority of their caucus, began pushing back. Leader McConnell and Senator Cornyn made it clear that despite their objections to Obamacare, they will allow debate to move forward. Despite the pressure from outside groups and members of their own party who were making this issue a litmus test for real conservatives, these leaders said enough is enough. You don't see Mitch McConnell or John Cornyn out there mounting a campaign to try and get the caucus to block the CR and cause a shutdown. They could be telling their members to hold the line on a cloture vote, put us in a shutdown mode over Obamacare, but they are not. And because of their position, everyone voted to move forward. And Cruz was in the position of first being against it, then being for it, because he knew if he voted against it, he would stand almost alone, that the number of votes you could count on one hand who might go with him. And that is because the Republican leadership decided not to play Cruz's game. What makes Leader McConnell and Senator Cornyn's decision particularly noteworthy is that my friends from Kentucky and Texas are both up for re-election next year. And Senator McConnell has already drawn a serious primary challenge, and Senator Cornyn has been threatened one. But despite these pressures, they refuse to go along with the extreme position of the hard right, and now the Senate, under Harry Reid's leadership, is on a path avoiding that mistake. So why is this important? Well, when the CR goes back to the House, it'll be up to Speaker Boehner to decide if he wishes to cave into the hard right and shut down the government, or stand aside and allow the government to open. Will he follow the lead of Senators McConnell and Cornyn and not succumb to the far right? or will he accede to the wishes of the Tea Party, even if it's certainly not a majority of his caucus and certainly not a majority of the House, and then shut down the government? Boehner is actually in a stronger position to resist than McConnell. He doesn't have a primary in his district. So why doesn't he step up to the plate and do the right thing and allow a clean CR to go through? If Leader McConnell and Senator Cornyn can stand up to the hard right with primary challenges nipping at their heels, Speaker Boehner, who's safe in his seat, ought to be able to do the same thing. Is he vulnerable to a challenge within his caucus? That's what they say. No more than Senator McConnell is. Speaker Boehner, who I like and respect, would be wise to take a page from the Senate Republicans' leadership's book. He would be wise to stand up to the extreme members on the hard right of the caucus and say, we've tried it your way and it's failed. He would be wise to take up a clean CR. We will pass it, put it on the floor, and then he should pass it, even over the vocal objections of the extreme right who want to hold the government hostage. If Speaker Boehner did the right thing, his party, his country, the Congress, and he would be better off for it. Will Speaker Boehner step up to the plate, as Republicans in the Senate have done? Only time will tell.
Senator Murray.
Well, Republican leadership has now allowed the Tea Party to push our country to the brink of a crisis. And now they need to step up and work with us so we don't go over the edge. Nobody's more frustrated than I am that Republicans spent the last 6 months blocking us from starting a budget conference. I told everyone, again and again, the only way to avoid lurching into another crisis was to come to the table before we were staring down the clock. They knew that, but they refused to come to the table. But now they have pushed us to today, days away from a government shutdown, and there is only one responsible path forward. While Republicans are focused on their internal battles and are fixated on pandering to the Tea Party, Senate Democrats are going to pass a clean, short-term bill to prevent a government shutdown. This shouldn't be difficult. We want to keep the government open at the current levels while work continues on a long-term budget deal to responsibly replace sequestration and end these constant crises. Democrats and Republicans have both said this year's spending levels are far from ideal. The Senate budget fully replaces sequestration with an equal mix of spending cuts and new revenue raised by closing loopholes skewed towards the wealthiest Americans and biggest corporations. The House budget replaces sequestration by fully funding defense programs and paying for that with deeper cuts to investments in families and jobs, all the time protecting the wealthiest Americans from paying even a penny more. So we know this continuing resolution doesn't solve all of our problems. We have a lot of work to bridge that divide, but the absolute bare minimum is we should be able to do right now is protect our families and our economy and prevent a government shutdown. So, as you heard, the Senate is going to pass our bill. We will send it back to the House. At that time, Republicans are going to need to put an end to the Tea Party temper tantrums, pass our bill without any gimmicks or games, and work with us to create jobs and tackle our deficit and debt responsibly. You know, families across our country are angry and they're disgusted, and they are sick and tired of seeing Congress sabotage the economic recovery with these constant crises. They want us to work together, and the last thing they want to see right now is another Tea Party crisis that drives us even further apart. If Speaker Boehner doesn't understand this by now, I want to spell it out for him. The Tea Party has no interest in making a deal. They want a shutdown. When they get it, they want to start pushing us to the next crisis. Maybe they can be distracted with debt limit bills filled with Tea Party fantasies, but that is just one more box canyon for a party that can't seem to stay away from them. The reality is the only path forward is for Democrats and Republicans to come together and work together on a bipartisan budget deal, which is what we have been asking to do now for 6 months. The first step is for the House to take up our bill, keep the government open, and then allow us to get to work.
House Republicans are doing a couple things today I wanted to get your take on. First, House Republicans are considering introducing a short-term bill that would keep the government funded for one more week while this fight continues. Is that something that you could support?
I'm not going to speculate on what they're going to do. We have all made it very clear. We want a clean CR. We're going to have a clean CR. That's what we're going to vote for. We're not going to play any of their games. So I'm not going to answer all your speculative questions about what they're going to do. Because as I announced when I gave my opening remarks to you, they don't know what they're going to do. Right now, they do not know what they're going to do. They're throwing all this mud, hoping some of it sticks on the wall, but it is mud and it won't stick.
And then on this bill that they're introducing to raise the debt ceiling, they've got about 15 items that they want to see included in any increase of the debt ceiling. Are any of those items things that you could accept or compromise on?
No.
Senator Reid, have you had any conversations with Speaker Boehner in the last day? Or
Not a single one.
Do you expect any meetings in the days ahead to try and find a way out of this impasse?
There's an easy way out of the path. All five of us have said so. Send us a clean CR, a clean debt ceiling. That's the path forward. There's no need for conversations. We've spoken loudly and clearly, and we have the support of the President of the United States, and that's pretty good. Let's see, I hear a voice. Okay.
Are you willing to negotiate on the debt ceiling if turning off the sequester for a year or two is on the table?
No. As much as we dislike the senseless sequestration, we despise it. It is senseless. As the chairwoman of the Appropriations Committee pointed out, look what it's doing to the National Institutes of Health. That's sequestration. If it kicks in next year, it'll be a total in 2 years of $3.6 billion. It is the envy of the rest of the world, the National Institutes of Health. But this genius that runs this, Francis Collins, isn't smart enough to run it with no money.
Senator, lots and lots of Democrats in the recent past have voted to repeal the medical device tax. It's unpopular with many of them and with all Republicans. I know that you warned against speculation, but that may well come back here, and lots of Democrats have voted for it. Would all Democrats vote against a repeal of that in this context?
Listen, I know you have been listening, but we want a clean CR. That's what we're going to get. If they want to shut down the government, here's how much time they have to figure it out. 4 days, 11 hours, 22 minutes, and 15 seconds. No. They can play around all they want. Some of the biggest supporters for doing away with the stupid tax, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that, doing away with that tax have told me they will not support that on CR. You know, what we have said, and Senator Durbin was very, very clear yesterday in laying out on the floor, if they want to deal with all these many issues, let's do it without a gun to the head of the American people. If they want to look at the device tax, let's do it in the context of a separate piece of legislation. We are not going to play games with the American people. And the message is getting through. The CBS poll that came out today, 80% of the Americans think what they're doing is foolishness. 75% of the Republicans believe that. They are talking about walking over a cliff. It's a big one. This is the time that calls for leadership of the House Republicans. I am thankful that we have John McCain and others in the Senate, Republicans, who've convinced the two leaders, McConnell and Cornyn. This is a path to oblivion for us. And so we need you in the House to do the same. Thanks, everybody.
Harry.
Senate Democratic leaders from just a short while ago. Meanwhile, the Senate continues debate on that continuing resolution, again passed by the House last week, with the 3-month time frame, the defunding of the health care law. Senator Reid introducing amendments late yesterday that would strip away that defunding language and would shorten the length of the CR to 2 months. Back on the House floor here, the first of 3 recorded votes. This one deals with rules on screening commercial truckers for certain sleep disorders. 2 more 5-minute votes will follow this. And next up, we're going to show you part of the news briefing from this morning from House Republicans. Their conference met this morning before the House came in. Here's what their leaders had to say.
Oh. I thought this was a year. Every year.
Morning, everyone. Listen, the American people don't want the President's health care bill, and they don't want the government to shut down. Republicans are listening. We passed a bill last week that would do just what the American people have asked. It's time for the Senate to listen and pass the bill that we sent over there. On the debt limit, we're going to introduce a plan that ties important spending cuts and pro-growth reforms to a debt limit increase. Now, the President says, I'm not going to negotiate. Well, I'm sorry, but it just doesn't work that way. We're not going to ignore Washington's spending problem, and we're not going to accept this new normal of a weak economy, no new jobs, and shrinking wages. So we need to strengthen our economy for all Americans, and we need to deal with Washington's spending problem.
Good morning. Speaker said last week we sent the Senate a continuing resolution that funds the government and stops Obamacare before it costs one more job or it costs families of this country $1 more of discretionary income. And we also talked a lot today about a plan we're going to put forward this week. It is a plan to address the debt ceiling. We have a debt crisis in this nation. I don't think many people have differed with that notion. And we do have a plan to reduce wasteful government spending, which also spurs economic growth. So our plan reduces energy costs for families.
Affirmative. The rules are suspended. The bill is passed. And without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. The unfinished business is the vote on the motion of the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. McHenry, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2600, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 2600.